morning. Welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on this 17th day of January 2023, a very important day for different people, specifically talking about IEBC, the exit of Wafula Chebukati and the two commissioners. But more importantly, I have in studio the Deputy Speaker of the Senate, Senator Gathuri Murungi. Good morning.
Morning, Sam.
Happy New Year. Good to see you.
Happy New Year to you too.
Dr. Eric Mutai, who is the Governor of Kericho County. Good morning.
Good morning, Sam.
How has it been? Close to 5 months now?
Fantastic.
Okay, we'll talk about that later. Wakili Hilary Sigei, Senator of Bomet. Good morning.
Good morning, Sam.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year too.
It's good to see you here.
Good to see you.
And we're here to talk about three main issues. There is the situation about education, the transition, the CBC transition that we're seeing from grade 6 to junior secondary. Some of the concerns that are there, we understand that the schools will be reopened, or rather, the first term of junior secondary will begin on January 30th. But we also speak about IEBC and also the situation in the counties. Let's begin by looking at the education sector. On Daily Nation, Form 1 blues for KCPE stars and parents, and also what Machogu's plans for junior secondary mean. Primary schools that will host junior secondary school will benefit from 9.6 million shillings injection when the Pioneer CBC class transitions to grade 7 at the end of this month, but parents will bear the cost of buying new uniforms for the learners. On the front page of this Standard, dream schools that top KCPE pupils will join. You see a bit of explanation there where some of the top learners have been invited to join. Of course, several disappointments of learners that applied for national schools they didn't get, or some that applied for schools and were sent to areas that they feel are far from their localities, but it is the reality of life. Dr. Mutai, let me begin with you and tell me about what's going on in your county, especially the concerns on the transition. We already know that the ministry is saying that public schools will not pay a cent. Instead, the government will be financing with 15,000 shillings. But there is also the concern that, yes, the Teacher Service Commission will be employing at least one teacher for every school. What are the real ground issues that you felt from your county that you'd say are key concerns for parents and the stakeholders?
Yeah, basically, I think I'm on record to have said that CPC has constituted and the movement and transition was not really properly structured, and we have always been saying this. We did present it as the chair of education to the working party, the President Working Party, our thoughts then that the best thing to do, because probably we could not throw the baby plus the bathtub, was to domicile GSC within the primary school structures. Facts on the ground, which are very stubborn, is that as it is now, government is facing a tough situation in making GSC a reality in primary schools. As we talk now, we are saying that we need laboratories in the GSC within the primary schools. When we talk about we need the labs in the primary schools, first of all, we don't even have sufficient classrooms, the basic classrooms for learning. We don't have the right infrastructure in those institutions. I applaud the president's effort of employing 30,000 teachers, which ultimately may bridge the gap over time. But then the truth is they still need much to be done. I would wish to see more supplementary budgets being done to ensure that we provide enough learning structures, enough classrooms, and even continue increasing the number of teachers that we have. But as we transist, managing this would require also creative and innovative ways of handling the situation, because as it is, it's a reality that we are going to have grade 6, grade 7, and grade 8 within those institutions. And now the first class to go there, we need to see how are we going to pair up, for example, if there is a local day school and a local primary schools adjacent to each other, how are we then going to pair up these learners so that they can share existing facilities with the local day schools within their localities? It is a painful reality that we must all come around and see how to chuckle around it for the sake of our children.
Interesting. And Senator Wakili, well, yes, that's his name. Wakili Hilary Sigei.
Yes.
When you look at Bomet, is what the governor is speaking about repeated there, but do you have any suggestions on what to do? Because transitions can be difficult, I mean, in any facet of life. Do you have any ideas on what's one of the ways of making it better?
Thank you, Sam. Interesting, before even I make, if any, a proposition as to how to resolve this issue, what the governor is saying is actually a reflection of the stubborn facts on the status of transition from the previous regime to CBC. It is a reality, and the facts about availability of infrastructure. And this is one of the most unfortunate things. When the ministry lays out the conditions of an institution to host what now we would call the transiting class within primary school, it is unfortunate that almost, from where I come from, 50% do not have the facilities and the structures that the ministry is saying you ought to have before you can be approved to host domiciling or to host a certain class, whether it is grade 7 or grade 6 or grade 8 in a particular primary school. But again, we have got to move it such that we are not saying CBC is as bad as it is being depicted. We have to accept the fact that the process leading to its rollout is what was mismanaged. The process leading to the transition and the timing is wrong. In my county, therefore, this is a reality that we have got to experience because the government, the ministry has said we must transition. We must have the junior class moving in from 30th of this month to the next level, and therefore I look at it in the context of two things with which when you listen to the cabinet secretary talking about the uniform, to me it's not an issue at all. It's okay, we can have the uniform as they were or new uniform because parents either way would have committed to purchase and have their pupils and their children having uniform. The issue is when you ask me to have a laboratory before I am allowed to host this junior secondary school, and in an institution where we don't have, the modalities of sharing is not in place. The people or the officials from the Ministry of Education who have gone around to collect the statistics are still out there. We've got only around 15 or 14 days to go before they're expected to report in schools. I had a conversation yesterday with the chairman of the Teacher Service Commission. The employment of the teacher is not an issue. It will give a complementary support to the structure. The biggest problem is infrastructure. And we cannot expect institutions, even if the government has given, they have said here that they are giving out 9 billion, which will translate to 4,000 per student in terms of infrastructure facilitation. We cannot build this infrastructure within the next 14 days to have these schools or the institutions ready to accommodate. That is a reality check back in the ground, and also it is across. It's not only in the county of Bomet, but it's all over. However, we've got to accept the fact that we've got to transition.
Right.
We will build on what we do as we progress. And I am sure in the fullness of time, there will be certain adjustments that must be made. And the proposal that I would now make to the ministry is that even though they are pushing for the rollout, they must adjust those requirements to ensure that whatever institutions which are accommodating junior secondary schools, if they don't have some of these structures, they should be allowed time within which to do it. Okay. And I would propose an enhancement of the facilitation in terms of funding. Because that way they will be able to, within certain reasonable time, have the structures in place, and we move on because we must move on anyway.
And speaking of funding, Deputy Speaker, because at the end of the day, you look at these institutions and the resources they have, the facilities they have, it's going to take a tall order for the country really to finance this, because it's not the only challenge in the education sector. You've seen even the challenges in the higher education sector. But for you, coming to this situation, junior secondary begins January 30, and this is the time we're even thinking about how do we do it. What then must we do? Because it's a curriculum that is, the rollout continues. After the 3 years, we'll go to the senior secondary. What for you must we do now, even as we focus on the future transitions to come?
Thank you, Sam. I think my colleagues have put it very well, that the issue is preparedness. You remember the last financial year, the government injected some money to build classrooms because the decision was not made whether the junior secondary schools students should go should be domiciled in the high schools or the secondary schools or in the primary schools. So the government injected money for classrooms and other facilities in the secondary schools. But then this game plan changed again, that this JS, junior secondary school, will be in the primary schools. So there is that challenge, especially they are talking of laboratories in all those, more than 23,000 primary schools. They have put it that they would love support, to get support from NGCDF. You know, also that is another challenge because also when you go to NGCDF in the constituencies, they don't have enough, the money has not been released to them. So it is a big challenge that maybe the government should look for ways of injecting more money, more funding to the primary schools, that I was saying junior secondary schools, so that they can be able to improve on the infrastructure. So to me, these teething problems will be there for some time, but maybe the curriculum itself is not a bad idea.
Okay.
But we will live with the teething problems until everything settles down.
Has any of you witnessed any curriculum transition in this country as a student, as a learner?
No, like myself, the 844 came before I got there.
Yeah.
So I was not the first student in the 844 system.
Okay.
So I had maybe 2 more classes, which were ahead of me.
Okay.
But some...
were there these teething problems, so it was difficult to tell as a learner at that time?
It was because, you know, that is the time we had now new subjects, music, art, and craft, introduced to schools. All primary schools were supposed to have workshops, yeah, for the practicals. So it was still a challenge. And if you go to the primary schools, there are so many workshops, yeah, in the primary schools which were constructed then. I think that is what even the primary schools should adopt again to renovate and make use of them.
Okay. Yes,
yes, I wanted to say that as a parent, I have actually transitioned. I've got a child in the 844 and I've got one in CBC. However much I might not be a learner, I've literally transitioned from the previous to CBC on the strength of what we do.
Yes.
It's quite interesting. The CBC is very involving. And
when you look at the comprehension of your children, I mean, how do they compare?
So far, for the one who is in CBC, it's a bit hard to do a comparison in terms of the extent of the comprehension. Although CBC has got a grasp of a lot of other things compared to the 844. The only worry, some, is that my kids school here in Nairobi. So the extent of the exposure, the extent of the facilities available in the school they are in are completely not in comparison with the children out there in the countryside. And remember, these are the same people who are studying within the same system of education. And so there is the hard element of inability to compare one who is in an institution where structures and facilities are available to enhance the ability to have the CBC felt, and one without similar structures up in the countryside.
Interesting. And you are the governor in one of the countryside. Do you think there's anything more that the county governments can do? And what would that mean? Because you would understand how the facilities are, yet education is not a devolved function. What would be your contribution?
Yeah, basically, and this is also what we're trying to explore with colleagues from the Council of Governors, because, you know, government is government. Whether national or the devolved unit, we serve the same people. My thoughts are we want to also explore as governors how we can pack up the national government to manage this process. We were trying to look into our budgetary allocations. Of course, some of the county governors have been able to have extensive linkages with donor partners, and when we see how we can help it. Yesterday, I had a round discussion with some of the investors in Kericho, and one of the things that I actually implore upon them is that let's see, like we have the multinationals, tea estates in Kericho, we have other investors, and the question I was asking and figuring out with them is how can we then pack up the national government to manage this? Is it possible that, you know, we build laboratories as part of your donation, as part of their social responsibility, if they've been doing like conservation and they've been doing other infrastructural work, can we then divert the money that we have within your budgetary so that we are able to support national government in building laboratories, building classrooms, and equipping for the national government? So it is a possibility that we're also looking as governors, because at the end of the day, we are directly, you know, in the grassroots with our people. We live with them every day. In fact, I hardly come to Nairobi myself, like Wakili, and we commit as Council of Governors that we'll try to explore with the resources that we have, that we've shared from the national government and from the donors that has been partnering with the national government, to see effectively that we assist the national government on the same. And it goes back again to the next thing, that we also need to think about building capacity among the teachers that are going to handle these learners. As it is, if you ask, and Sam, you remember that I'm a former don in a university, a senior don, and if you would ask today, even a university lecturer, his knowledge about CPC, you'll be surprised that he has no clue about the same. If you go to the teachers training institutes and you ask the teacher trainers, what do you know about CPC? They are equally clueless. Now, the teacher, the product of the process, now the teacher in the classroom, is even worse. There is a lot of gap in terms of constitutionalizing the content and all these things. So what we need to do, even as we push for the society to manage the situation, is also to push into capacity building, in-service training, and support the TSC to be able to equip the teachers handling these classrooms for the best, because it's a new reality. Now, who are these teachers who are going to handle TSC? Are they the teachers that are prepared to handle secondary school? And I'll tell you that the teacher prepared to handle secondary school is a whole world altogether, compared to a teacher prepared to handle primary schools, in terms of content, in terms of pedagogical skills, and in terms of handling approach. The secondary school teacher is prepared for a different formation altogether, while a primary school trained teacher is prepared for a completely different world. That is why we have different training for the ECD teacher.
Right.
And we have different training for the teacher handling the primary school, and we have different training for the teacher handling the secondary school in terms of content. And even in terms of, the presentation could be the same, but in terms of content and management of children, because you're talking about children. This kid is transitioning from class 6 to 7, even though the name has changed to be junior secondary school, he's still a kid. And his mental capacity, his orientation and preparation cannot be compared to that child now who is going to Form 2 or Form 1. So it's a whole world altogether, but we commit from the council that we will continue partnering with national government to ensure that we get the best in education. And this is as a rider. It also speaks to our generation that no leader in this country should ever politicize education, should ever try to alter structures of education as a legacy. Legacy cannot be born through politicizing education. CPC was politicized from the word go. It was pushed to the people's throats. You had CSS at that time throwing words carelessly that we cannot go back on this program without pausing a bit to think that what if we retreat for a year? Can we get a better structure? So it speaks to our generations that going to the future, there are salient basic structures of our society that we cannot politicize or tamper around it, because it will speak to future generations and the economy of the nation.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right, and that's important, because that's the question I was asking about, because we've now done 2 years of pre-primary level, that is PP2, we've done 6 years of primary school. Now we're into the next 3 years of junior secondary. After that, there will be 3 years of senior secondary. Then after that, there will be 3 years of the university. I just don't know what preparations are being done in regards to that. And I want us to transition, but before we do so, I want to give you a line that you can call and make a contribution to the conversation here in studio. You can call via 0742-961-343. Again, you can call via 0742-961-343. 2343. You can raise your questions with the panelists here in studio, but you can also tweet us at Citizen TV Kenya, at Sam Gituku. The hashtag to use is Daybreak, and text us via 22422. We're back shortly with a conversation around IBC.